Everyone, how are we this morning? Somewhat awake. I know it's a very early Saturday to be getting started on this. For those in the audience who don't know me, I think most of you probably do. My name is Rose Hoffman. I'm the Director of Communications for the city, and I will be facilitating our session this morning on property tax and budget basics. I have a helper with me today. This is Tori. She is a student at Aledo High School. She has been interning with us this summer. We have had a wonderful time showing her how government works, and she still wants to go into it. She's going to help me with my things this morning. So to get started, I want to go ahead and put a couple of disclaimers out there. The slides that you're going to see today and the numbers that we're going to show you as examples today are not this year's budget numbers. Our budget workshop actually begins directly after this session, so we don't have the final numbers on this year's budget yet. So we're going to be working with numbers from the approved fiscal year 25-26 budget, so the budget we're just finishing up. But we're going to use those as examples today so that we kind of understand how the math works and so I can break down some real world examples. So we're going to start with property taxes. Oh, by the way, if anyone has any questions at any point, it's supposed to be an interactive morning. So if you have questions, you can stop me and say, hey, can you clarify that? Or I have a question about that. You don't be shy about asking questions. I want this to be interactive. We'll start with property taxes. The way that your property tax is calculated is it's the value of your house divided by 100, and then they take that number and multiply it times our tax rate, and that's how they determine your tax obligation. So if the example we're going to use today is a home that is valued at $300,000. So if your home is valued at $300,000 and you're in the Aledo ISD portion of Willow Park, because we have a few people who are in Weatherford ISD, but if you're in Aledo ISD, your tax assessment would have been $47,3025 last year. So we're going to leave this up because we're going to play with this number a little bit. We're going to break this number down. Tori, do you want to go to the next one? Let's talk about tax rates a little bit. The tax rate is set by the city council every year. Willow Park. Oh. Good point. So the tax rate is set by the city council every year. Our tax rate this last year was 42.1 cents and some change per $100 valuation. So my house is worth $300,000. They divide that by 100. We multiply it times that 42 cents, and that's how we come up with this bill. Yes, ma'am.
How does that rate compare to other areas around us?
So Weatherford and Aledo are a little bit lower than us. If you want to look at that chart right there, we're the green bar. Okay. Yes, ma'am. So Weatherford and Aledo are a little bit lower than us. Fort Worth, Azle, Mineral Wells, and Springtown are all higher. And again, I'm basing this on this fiscal year that we're in currently tax rates. I don't think anyone has set their tax rate for next year because we don't have all of the numbers yet that we need to set the tax rates. So this is the tax rates that we're operating on under this current fiscal year. So that kind of tells you where we're at in the pack as far as the people that are around us and what that looks like. Victoria, do you want to go to the... Oh, one point I want to make before we get rid of that poster. The city says this. The county appraisal district says this. We have no control over this number at all. For example, if your house went from $300,000 to $350,000 last year, as far as your appraisal value goes, that's not a number the city has any control or connection with. That is set by the county appraisal districts in coordination with the state comptroller's office. We control the tax rate. So that's important to note, especially as we look at our property taxes, because I know property taxes is something, I have concerns about it. I think we all have concerns about it. Rising tax rates in Willow Park are not the reason your taxes are going up. Rising appraisal values are the reason your taxes are going up. So that said, I just want to make that very clear that the city is only in control of the tax rate portion of this equation. Okay, Victoria, you want to go to the next one for me, please? Who gets your property taxes? The slide on the screen also shows the breakdown for Weatherford ISD, but since the vast majority of Willow Park is in Aledo ISD, I only put Aledo on the big one. Of my 47,3025 that I have, 61% of that goes to Aledo ISD. 21.6% of it goes to the city of Willow Park. Weatherford College gets a little over 5%. The Emergency Services District, which is the fire department, gets a little over 5%. The Parker County Hospital District gets 3.8%, and Parker County Road Fund gets 2.6%. So as you can see, the vast majority of your property taxes are going to Aledo ISD, with the second biggest piece of the pie going to the city of Willow Park. And so that kind of breaks down so if you look at, when you get your property tax bill, it actually breaks down per taxing entity what their tax rate is and how much of your taxes go to that entity, which is why we're going to show you what we're about to show you. Any questions so far? Okay, Victoria, if you'll switch that out for me. So if we're working with a home value of $300,000, again, for our example, these are the dollar amounts that each one of those taxing entity gets. So if I just wrote a property tax check for not quite $5,000, $3,500 of that is going to go to the school district. Another $1,200 goes to the city, and then going down, Weatherford College gets $318, the fire service district gets $300, the hospital district gets a little over $252, and then the Parker County Road Fund gets $150. So you wrote a check for $4,700. The city saw $1,200. I think that's a really important distinction to note. Yes, sir?
So who sets those percentages of who gets what piece of the pie?
So that's based on the tax rate, right? So everyone's tax rate, and this is how I did the math on this, I added up everybody's tax rate to what the total tax obligation was. For example, Aledo ISD, theirs is, let's say, $1 and some change. So I added ours, the school district, the fire district, everybody else, and then I went and broke that down by percentages. So it's basically determined by what each individual entity's tax rate is. So if the town of Victoria has a tax rate of $1 and the county of Hoffman has a tax rate of 50 cents, $1.50 is the total tax rate. She's getting 2/3, I'm getting 1/3.
So you're setting the tax rate strictly for the 1264 that the city of Willow Park is going to get?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, each individual entity's tax rate is calculated on the full value of your home, just like this. So for example, with the school district, same thing, $300,000 house divided by 100 times the school district tax rate.
Okay.
And so that'd be the portion that the school district gets.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay.
And each of the entities have their own tax.
Yes, each one the county collects it all,
Yes.
but each entity has their own, and so like the school district, for example, they'll go through hearings just the same as we will for our budget to set their tax rate for the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this may be a dumb question, but
There are no dumb questions.
who sets the rates for each of those?
For each of the entities, they're controlling boards. So like Parker County ESD has a board of directors, just like we have a city council. Aledo ISD has a board of trustees, which is their version of a city council. Weatherford College has a board. Parker County tax rates are set by the commissioner's court. And then the Parker County Hospital District has a board of directors as well. So they basically meet and they go over their budget and they determine what are their needs, what has our tax rate looked like historically, is our budget going to stay about the same, and then they look at their tax rate accordingly. Now that said, without getting too terribly in the weeds, because I don't want to get out over my skis about state law, there are rules about how much tax rates can go up for a lot of entities. And there is some extraordinarily confusing legal language surrounding those tax rate increases. There's a thing called the no new revenue rate that is a very misleading moniker. So this is the very simple breakdown, but a city or a school district cannot go in and just hike your taxes by 20% without voter approval. That's not how it works. The state is very clear about our tax rates, and our ranges have to be within a certain area in order to be compliant with state law. And that's something that we'll look at as a city this summer. We get our appraised values, what our values are for the property in Willow Park. We'll get that at the end of July. And then we'll be able to start working these numbers for ourselves. We do have some estimates already based on what we know is happening. But until we get those final numbers, we can't make those calculations. Yes, sir?
Do the appraised values come in every 2 years or?
Every year. Yes, sir. We get them from the county every July. And that's how we work to calculate our rates. Okay, let's move on. Tori, what's next? So working from the 25-26 budget, again, that is this year's budget. This is what was budgeted in this year's budget. This is what was approved by council last year. The total amount that we brought in from property tax revenue, and that's this guy, right? That's this equation, that we budgeted. This is not actuals. We do not have actuals because we have not made it through the whole fiscal year, but this is what we had written into our budget documents. $4.073 million on property tax. Again, that's what we get from here. Sales tax revenue, that's when you guys go spend money at local grocery stores and restaurants, and we love it when people do that. $2.175 million. There are other forms of revenue that we get, such as permitting fees. Court has a little bit of revenue. We have rental income from the folks that are in our building with us. Mixed beverage taxes, franchise fees, which is, for example, AT&T wants to use one of our easements to run one of their transmissions through. We get a fee for that from AT&T. So our total income projected was $1.473 million. Yes, ma'am.
So I live in an apartment.
Yes, ma'am.
My apartment fall on that top line, they pay you, I pay them and they pay you the property.
The owners of the property are responsible for the tax. Yes, ma'am. Yes. So whoever owns that property has to pay taxes on their property.
I'm paying them, they're paying me.
Yes, yes. So yeah, that's how that works for renters, is whoever the property owner is has the tax revenue. So that brings us to a total of $7.721 million that we had projected as income for the city this year. Don't let that number fool you. That is not how much money we have to spend. Victoria, would you like to go to the next slide? So there's three parts to the budget. We have a general fund, we have enterprise funds, and then we have hotel occupancy taxes. For the purpose of today, we are just going to talk about the general fund because that is the workshop that we're doing, and that's always the fund that is the most complicated, that we work on the most. Skipping down hotel occupancy taxes, I think we've talked a little bit about this in the past. If you guys have watched council meetings, we've kind of touched on that topic. Hotel occupancy taxes are an extra tax that is collected when you stay in a hotel in Willow Park. So it's basically our visitors that are paying that tax. Those can only be spent on very limited uses. They can be spent on it's essentially anything that attracts tourists who might stay overnight. So when you see, for example, the billboard out on the highway, that billboard is specifically used with language to encourage tourism because we cannot spend those dollars on streets or salaries or debt payments or anything like that. We have to use it on attracting visitors and things that are going to attract visitors. So, for example, we've used it to sponsor the music series at the district because that brings in a lot of visitors from out of town. So that's what we use those dollars for. And there's some information in some of our past council packets, but if anybody has any questions about that, I'm happy to talk to y'all one-on-one later. But today I want to focus on the general fund. Enterprise funds, that's our water, our wastewater, that's basically everything that's on the utility billing side. So those funds are self-supporting. The water payments come in, and then we use the money from that to pay for the expenses out of that side. So general fund is pretty much everything else. General fund is what we use for just about all city functions. It's personnel, it's operating expenses, supplies, contractual services, basically everything that's not water and wastewater related. So the general fund is what we're going to be working with today. Victoria, would you like to? This is where it starts getting a little more confusing, so I'm going to go really slowly and try to break this down as simply as possible. Our total tax rate, right, is 42 cents. The tax rate is always divided into two sections. On the left-hand side, you're going to see, thank you, Todd, maintenance and operations. Our tax rate for the maintenance operations sides is 19 cents. That is operating expenses, road projects, employee salaries. What we brought in on the M&O side, and this is what we used to operate with, was $1.922 million. That is the money that is used in the general fund for us to spend things on throughout the year. It is not $7 million, it is not $5 million, it is $1.922. The other $2.15 million that we get specifically from our tax rate goes to our INS payments. INS is paying off road projects, paying off the police station building, basically any capital improvement project that is done on a very large scale that we have taken a loan on, a low interest loan. Those are the payments that we're making on those loans. So that's how much we have budgeted on that side, and then the $1.922 million, that's our operating. Now, the sales tax that we get is in addition to these two numbers. So the sales tax also goes straight into the general fund. So we have, yes, ma'am. Yes.
So who breaks that down? How much goes into which pie?
It's based on how we set the tax rate, and so that's set by council and our finance department. So basically, they look at what do we have in, we call it debt service on the right-hand side. what do we have in debt service? What do we need in order to be able to make those payments, basically? What's left over, and that's how they make the division of how they're going to do it. And also, when we look at the maintenance and operations side, we have to look at, did we need a new police officer this year? Did the public works guys have a truck that finally ran out of life and they had to buy a new truck? So there's a whole lot of variables that have to be looked at. I will tell you, it is not easy math. It is a pretty complicated calculation to figure out and kind of predict what we think we're going to need. Yes, ma'am.
So say for instance, city parks, would they fall under both? Like the employees fall under the left side and like the parks itself fall under the right? And
Everything's on the left.
everyone-
Yes. Yes, sir.
What is sinking?
That's a fancy government term for you got a bill you got to pay. Actually, Michelle, do you know what they mean by sinking? Okay. Yeah, I will tell you, Paul, in all my years in local government, I've never seen it's just a term that they use. It's similar to the phrase new revenue rate. It's just a required word that the government wants us to use. But the interest in sinking side is basically, it's our debt service. It's us paying our bills. So those are the two numbers that we worked with in this year's budget. Chelsea, did you have something you wanted to add, or are you just, okay. I saw you moving back there. Okay, Victoria, do you want to go to the next one? Here's how we spend our money. So obviously personnel is the biggest operating expense for us. Personnel is always the biggest operating expense with anything. If you've ever owned a business, you know that your payroll is probably a great deal of your expenses and your overhead. So we do have 45% of what we spend as far as our allocations goes towards personnel. I do want to note that a few years ago, probably, I want to say 2022, the piece of the pie for contractual services was way larger, and this was way smaller. We have hired several staff members, including a city engineer and a building inspector, that we now have on staff that can do those services, and we have saved the city a significant amount of money by doing so. Rather than having to contract out building official services, for example, we hired Randy Law back in 2022, and it saved the city probably tens of thousands of dollars a year. That said, we still have a very lean staff for the amount of services that we provide and the amount of things that we do. I don't think there's anybody in our building that just does one job. So that's something to note too on the personnel. It looks like a really big piece of the pie here, but there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. Yes, ma'am.
Do the salaries pay match with average, like they're not too high, too low, they're kind of right with that?
As far as like comparable to other cities?
Yeah.
So we're crunching some numbers on that now. It's difficult to do apples to apples comparisons because we're such a small city and because so many of us wear multiple hats. For example, we have some people that do two completely different jobs. And so it's hard to go and say, oh, they're making the same thing as they are in Hudson Oaks or in Aledo or White Settlement or some of these other comparable communities, because the people over there are not doing two jobs. So it's difficult to do that comparison. We are crunching some numbers. We're trying to take a look at it. Council has asked us to review that. And so we're gathering some data now to kind of see where we line up with other cities. Anecdotally, I can tell you just from what I know from when I've been here, most of the city staff is under average for what we do. Well, go spend some sales tax dollars. So this is basically what our expenses look like. Debt service, that's the INS that we talked about on the previous slide. So this interest in sinking that we have right here, that's this little piece of pie here, right? So that's us paying off for example, we're just about paid off on the Ranch House Road project, or I think we're getting pretty close on that. The public safety building where the police department is, those were two bonds that were passed in 2016 or 2015, I think. But so we're making payments on those guys. We're paying on this building. We're paying on when we did Crown Road and Sam Bass Road a couple of years ago. Those are the projects that we're paying off there. We actually did finish paying off some debt this year. So that number's probably going to look a little different for next year because we did actually pay down some of the debt that was coming due to the end of its life. On that note, let's go to our next slide. Let's talk about debt. It's not a dirty word in city finance. You want to switch me out, please? Oh, I don't have a slide for that. That's right. There wasn't any charts or anything. So you're not going to pay cash for your house, or most of us aren't, right? If I tried to save up and pay cash for my home, I would probably not have a home until I'm probably 60 years old, right? Because it's going to take a really long time to save up the amount of money. So the way that this was explained to me by our accountant, and I thought this was a wonderful way to put it, is if we try to save up and pay cash for all of the projects that we need to do as a city, it is terribly unfair to those of you who are driving on those roads right now. If we save 30 years so that we can redo a road, then you guys have to wait 30 years for a road. Alternatively, we go to a funding source, and the city of Willow Park has excellent credit, so we get very good interest rates on our loans. We go to that funding source, we take out the funding for the road, and then we pay it off in a time that is not longer than the life of the road. So, for example, if we build a road that we think is going to have a 20-year life, the debt for that road will never be longer than 20 years. We usually try to bring it in shorter than that amount of time. This is the funding mechanism that cities all over the country use to fund these projects. It is not an indication of poor financial health. There is a very big misconception that if a city has debt, that is an indicator that we do not know how to manage our money and how we don't know how to pay our bills. That is incorrect. That is a misconception. Right now, our general fund debt, and this is not talking about water and wastewater projects because, again, those are enterprise fund items, so those don't come out of the general fund. We use it for roads, we use it for buildings. Most of that debt is around a 3 to 5% interest rate. And we have not had any problem repaying our obligations, and our creditors are very pleased with us. So the city is in very good financial health. So don't let this number of 20 million make, because it sounds like it's a big number, right? Like $20 million is a lot of money. But that $20 million is not an unhealthy number for a city our size, nor is it financed at a crazy high interest rate. And this allows us the funding mechanisms that we need to help people with their needs and help our city with its needs now and not 10, 20, 30 years from now. I don't know about you guys, but I would really rather not wait 30 years until the road in front of my house gets fixed. I'd like that done now on a low interest loan. Hey, thanks. So that kind of gives you an idea on the basics of the general fund and the property taxes. At this point, we went through that a little faster. I hope I didn't talk too fast. At this point, I'll take any questions that anybody has, and we can just have a conversation about this, whatever you guys want to talk about.
I have a question about, I'm just kind of thinking in my head, all the revenue sources.
Yes, ma'am.
So those are numbers that are probably constantly changing. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
So we've got new housing developments that are going to increase
Mm-hmm.
our property tax,
Mhm.
right? And, we have development going on that's going to increase our sales taxes. The population is increasing, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And our roads are deteriorating and things like that. So you've got lots of numbers that are constantly moving.
Yes, ma'am. So many variables.
So that's something the city council, when they sit down and look at all these numbers,
Mhm.
have to kind of, how far out in the future do they,
Mhm.
is it a year?
Well, it really just depends on what we're looking at. And it's difficult to predict on some of the things. Like we can project, for example, if there's a new housing development going in and we know how many rooftops there are going to be and approximately what the price point or what the value, appraised value of those properties is going to be. We can do a little rough math. For example, okay, there's 10 houses going in here at X amount of dollars each. That's going to bring us, this much money. But how fast are those houses going to sell, right? So what we usually do is we try to look a little bit into the future and we try to kind of pay attention to as things change and what's coming online. Sales tax, we predict extremely conservatively. We almost always come in just a hair above what we've predicted on sales tax because we try to, COVID kind of reminded us all that sales tax cannot be dependent upon because sales tax numbers all over the state tanked during COVID because no one was going anywhere. So that we are very careful about our sales tax projections. Even if we know we've got new businesses coming and we've got new retail happening, we try to be very careful and keep that number on the low end. And if we have more than that, fantastic. But we do the same thing on our property tax revenues. We always assume in our forecasting and our budgeting that we're going to make less money. And if we make more than that, woohoo, great. But we always kind of prepare for I wouldn't say worst case scenario, but the leanest scenario. We try to run a very, very lean budget on our income projections. And then once they come on and we officially know what we're going to get from them, then we can start working with those numbers.
Another
Yes, ma'am.
Does the city of Willow Park have, I'm just thinking about like personal finances.
Sure.
Like an emergency fund,
Yes, ma'am, we do. We are required by the state to keep, is it 6 months, Michelle?
180 days.
180 days of operating cost in reserve. So if, for example, we have another complete shutdown or something of that nature, COVID taught us a lot about working through unexpected situations. But if we have something unexpected like that happens, we are required to keep at least 6 months in reserves. So there's been some numbers tossed around about what the city has in reserves and what the city doesn't have in reserves. Some of that money we can't touch unless we have an emergency situation. So we do have, to answer your questions, yes, we do have a savings account. Yes, ma'am.
Is that what the state calls a rainy day fund?
The state words it differently than we do. We call it a cash reserve. Yes. But yeah, basically the same concept. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you know of the plans to grow, like, the city limits? Like, will we be getting additional, revenues and, I guess, costs by expanding our city limits?
So the way that the law works in the state of Texas is, so Willow Park has its boundary, right? And then we have a little area outside of our boundary called our ETJ, our extraterritorial jurisdiction. I know, again, big word from the state. But basically, it's like a little border around the city that is close to us, but not inside the city limits. If someone were to want to come into the city limits, they have to petition the property owner has to petition the city. That petition has to go before, among other things, the city council, and they have to approve it coming into the city. What we cannot do under any circumstances in state law is come grab your property without your permission. So as we grow and as we expand and as we build out, there are going to probably be property owners that want to come into the city limits. And certainly we're willing to have those conversations with them. But again, it's a little bit difficult to predict those growth patterns right now, especially because y'all know it frequently changes around here. This is a very rapid growth area. So from one week to the next, there's even more things happening, right? It seems like every time we open the paper or look at our phones, there's something else that's being built. So those property owners can choose to come into the city, and certainly if we're able to work out something with them, that's a conversation we're open to, but we can't just go get land. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I was just kind of curious because it's not like, I'm new here and my mechanic I thought was in Alito and I show up nowhere in Willow Park and I'm like, why does my Google Maps tell me this is Alito? I was just
Well, so that's another fun fact. Willow Park does not have its own zip code. We have actually been petitioning for years to get our own zip code. And the Postal Service thinks that we don't have a need for our own zip code in our own post office. As a matter of fact, Tony and I fought this for months a couple of years ago because we really wanted us to have our own zip code. So on the southern side of the interstate down here, we share a zip code with Alito. So very often, they show up as Alito addresses. Up here, we share a zip code with Weatherford. I live kind of over on the north side of town, well, not the north side of town, but north of the highway, and often my mail says Weatherford on it. But I am firmly inside the city limits of Willow Park. So it's the zip code. That's a Postal Service thing. Tony and I would very, very much like to get that resolved, fixed, and get our own zip code, especially as we grow our identity as a city. We think it's important for us to be our own thing and not be sharing zip codes and addresses with other cities. But that's where that confusion comes from, is that those guys down there, we share a zip code with Alito, and so there's people that quite literally do not know where they're at when they're down there, which is a little frustrating, but we'll get her solved eventually. Who else? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, two questions. One, can you talk a little bit about the budget process in terms of like, when's the fiscal year starting?
Sure.
And what are the different steps of the budget? And then the other question I had, I think it's about to escape me. What was it? Oh, yes. Okay, so once the budget is set, does the city sit down every, month or every quarter and see how we're doing actual spending versus budgeted? How does that work?
So let me take the second question first. We have a CPA, an extraordinarily talented CPA who's been with the city a very long time. He does quarterly financial reports for us that actually are in the council packets every quarter. Yes. And so he's the one that kind of comes in and checks and looks at actual versus, and then Michelle, of course, in her role, she also looks at those things. But yeah, we have an accountant that comes in and reviews things on the regular and goes ahead and looks and sees how are we doing on projected versus actual, and then he'll come to city council and say, we had projected, $700,000 for development, but we actually only have about 450 for development, so that's going to come in under, or, vice versa. We projected a certain thing on sales tax, and we ended up having a really good spring. So now we have, $10,000 more sales tax than we thought. So we do regular financial health checkups throughout the year. As far as the fiscal year question, our fiscal year runs from October 1st to the end of September every year. So the budget that we're working on right now, the numbers that I showed you today, those are the numbers that began on October 1st of 2025. So we still have another quarter to go, or close to a quarter in this fiscal year, which is why we don't have any of the final, why I'm working with what was projected versus what's actual, because we won't have the actuals until the end of the year when we do our quarterly reports. And then, of course, we'll have an annual report, and then we have auditors that come in every year, too, and audit everything. And then they'll present their findings. I think we do the audits in the spring, right?
We have to have it done in 180 days from the end of the fiscal year, so they show up December or January.
Okay. So yeah, in December or January, then an auditor comes and looks at the previous fiscal year and lets us know if they've had any findings, and we've had squeaky clean audits for the last several years. So, but yeah, they're another independent third party that comes in and reviews our financials. As far as when we set the budget, we typically start talking about next year's budget in the spring. I think Tony and Michelle and I had our first conversations as far back as like March. And then we start working on it kind of through the end of the spring, early part of summer. Like I said earlier, we don't get our final certified appraisal values until July 25th. So a lot of what we're working with is kind of budgeting based on projections and what we know has come into the city and kind of where we think we're at on that. So like the numbers that we'll go over today, that's our projections based on what we expect to get, which we're usually pretty close on our projections, but we won't have the final numbers for another week or so, maybe, yeah, about another week or so. So we start talking in spring. July is usually when we have budget meetings and workshops and things like that. We start going over things. We take feedback from council. Council gets a chance to go through it, see if there's anything that they have questions about. And then in August and September, there are public hearings for the tax rate and the budget. Those are always published in the newspaper and on our website. That's when we give people a chance to come give feedback if there's something they'd like to provide input on. And then we usually pass the tax rate, ideally, and budget around the 1st of September, so that by the time October 1 rolls around, everything is locked in and ready to go and our plan is in place. Yes, sir.
So when it comes time to go out and finance a project, can you talk to the difference of why we would use a CO versus a GO versus a tax to go get that project financed?
That's a Michelle.
That's a little bit more.
Well, I can give you information on that, but I can't get super in depth on it. I know the difference between all of them, but I don't know the benefits versus the drawbacks. So I'm going to kick that question to Michelle if she has an answer for that.
The answer I will give is that a CO is considered long-term debt. So it's council approval, it's certificates of obligation. Normally you will do them for 20 to 30 year 30-year interest loans. You're going to use that more for long-term road projects, purchasing a new city hall, building a new public safety building, those types of projects.
Okay.
General obligation normally is what you take to your taxpayers for approval, and that they can still be long-term debt. They're usually a shorter time frame, although they can go up to 30 years, they're usually between 10 to 30, depending on what you are financing. Tax notes are 7-year loans. They are usually higher interest. However, they do have a callback on them quickly. So like in a year, if you had the money to pay it off, or you rewarded a grant to, like you started a project and then you rewarded a grant later,
Okay.
you could actually call back that loan. It must be at least 1 year out, and then you can call back that loan and actually pay it off.
Okay.
Then, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
And you said the GO is taxpayers approved?
Yes,
But the other two don't require tax.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
My understanding, Houston, to kind of summarize that, is that the type of debt that you take out really is dependent upon the type of project and how long you want, like, for example, if we have something that, again, what I talked about earlier, life cycles. If you have a road that you know is going to last you a really long time, long-term debt makes more sense on that than short-term debt. If it's something that's going to be a smaller scale project, short-term debt that you get paid off faster makes more sense.
Thank you.
But that is part of why we employ the incredibly smart people with our CPA and our bond counsel who help us decide what the smartest decisions are for us.
And wouldn't you also say that, let's see, you take a longer obligation, say on a road, because you want the people who move in 10 years, 20 years from now to actually pay on that road because they're using it.
Absolutely,
As opposed to
yes.
making us who live here
Absolutely.
now pay for their portion of.
Exactly, exactly. For example, this, I'm going to pick on Tori because she doesn't pay taxes yet. If we're going to do a project that's going to benefit me and eventually Tori, I want her to take on her share of the debt obligation when it's time for that. I don't want to pay for the whole road myself. So we can go ahead and take out the loan. My tax base and the tax base of my peers can pay for it until, like you said, the new people that move in or the people that, then their taxes will help pay a portion of that as well. So it's a much more equitable distribution that way.
Would you also speak to the council gives financial incentives for developments to come in? Example, you give, was it standard services, whatever it was, you gave them a chapter 380 and they didn't have to pay property tax, half of their property taxes for, 40 years, 20 years. How does the council take it? I mean, you've got your property tax, but if you're gonna give an abatement to, for 40 years, to new development, they're only gonna pay half of that. How does the council determine those financial incentives in context of what they're gonna pay for the future, their tax rate?
So that's really driven by what is the development that they're bringing in. So if it's a restaurant, is it an economic driver? Is it the first restaurant that's there? Is it an area that's not quite developed yet? Whereas when that starts, when that restaurant comes open or that store comes open, is it drawing other attention? Activity breeds activity, right? So if it's the first restaurant that's there or the first building that's there, that is the base. Other developers are going to look at that and, oh, well, that's going here. So for instance, like if you have a shopping center, okay, you have an anchor store. The anchor store is what other entities are looking at whenever they're saying, okay, well, there's a Walmart. So we know Walmart done all their studies, and we know that they're firmly set there. So here we are. We're going to go ahead and go there too, or this is going to happen. So is it an economic driver? Is it something that is just not I don't mean to pick on nail salons, but it's not a nail salon. So is it something that's going to drive us property taxes, sales tax? So what does it mean to our economy? So that's what it determines. And there's part of you don't list what you never had. So if it's helping out the developer, there always is a cap as to how much you're providing to them, so that it is under a structure and there's a cap. So it's not in perpetuity. There's always a duration as to what that agreement is and how much is allocated. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Does that help?
Yes, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that's always really confused me is I don't understand. I guess I'm learning more now, but like, for example, your whole explanation that you gave in those city council meetings several months ago about the signs out there.
Yes, ma'am.
I never knew that. That was so confusing to me because I was thinking, wow, we're paying for those signs out there, and I'm thinking, we got roads that need to be
Sure,
built
yeah.
and all that. And then you gave that presentation, I was like, oh, so it comes from the hotel
Yes, ma'am.
occupancy tax. So, I guess there are other things. I always get confused because there's those two buckets of money, right?
Right.
So there are very particular things that have to be paid from each of them. You can't like go to the other bucket to pay for something.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
Is that like set by state law?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The way that the way that city finance works in the state of Texas is very strictly controlled by state law. There are very particular methods and procedures and deadlines that we have to hit, and phrasing that we have to use, and structure, the way that we structure our account and our financials is all very regimented. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you get that one bucket where you're paying all the debt, so that money's gotta be there to pay back debt.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes,
you
ma'am.
can't be borrowing from that to go use on a general.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, well, see, that helps me understand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, I don't mean to pick on the scab here, but if we go to home rule, home rule, would any of this change?
No, sir.
Not a bit?
No.
Okay.
Because Texas law trumps home rule.
That's correct. Yes, the state of Texas laws will always trump whatever our local ordinances are, even if we were a home rule city.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Paul?
City council executive session, seems like there's some sort of legal requirement. I understand it's close, but some sort of legal requirement for reporting. I don't know if it's minutes or actions taken. What are those requirements of the executive session in the room? I haven't found them. Where do I find them?
So I'm not entirely sure what it is that you're asking. Can you maybe clarify your question a little bit for me?
Does executive session require minutes?
So there is a report that is made after executive session that is, gosh, Dana would know the official phrase, but there's basically a one sheet that is made that says, these are the topics that we talked about, here's who was present. It does not go into a ton of detail. Executive session is considered to be extremely confidential. That's why it's called executive session, and that's why most of what is in executive session is attorney-related. So the type of minutes that you see for a normal city council will not be published or for executive session.
So Paul, the city secretary can go into that further. We're gonna kind of stick to budget stuff on this, if you don't mind. So we'll stick to budget, but we can talk about that too.
I would also invite you to come back for our Muni-versity session later this year, specifically talking about city council functions and the city secretary and city administration. Yes, sir.
I noticed on the pie chart,
That one?
yes.
Yes, sir.
Those percentages don't necessarily align with the previous chart
This guy?
between the 1.9 and the 2.5.
So the 1.9 and the 2.5 go together here because the debt service is part of this chart. That's how the accountant told me to explain it. So, but yes, the debt service. Now, mind you, this chart also includes our sales tax dollars. So like we can use sales tax dollars towards everything but debt service in the general fund. So these numbers are not going to add up to exactly what these numbers are because these numbers do not include sales tax.
Okay.
Yes, this is just the general fund, or this is our property tax revenues.
Okay.
And then this includes sales tax revenues.
Okay.
Is that clear as mud for you?
You know, I suspected that was it, but I just wanted.
Yes, sir. Yes, that's exactly what it is.
The second question relates to the vision. Now, you stated we're a growing area, so we have to make some investment.
Sure.
In building the future. But we have a lot of infrastructure, particularly with roads and wastewater and things like that.
Yes, sir.
That is very old, so it makes more sense to upgrade those than it is to, quote, maintain them. Okay. How is that handled in the budgeting process? And are there long-term plans to bring the whole city up to par, where it should be, other than, have to concentrate perhaps on developing areas?
Sure. Well, I will tell you that we make people build their own roads when they come in, as far as inside the development. We're not paying for the roads in a new subdivision, they're paying for their own roads. That said, obviously, I think we're all very painfully aware that the roads in Willow Park need addressing. We are in the process of updating something called our comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is basically the whole vision. When you talked about vision earlier, that's kind of the whole vision. The comprehensive plan includes a lot of things related to the city's future and what we want to look like as we grow. Like, who do we want to be when we grow up, right? Under that umbrella of comprehensive plan is something called the capital improvement plan. The capital improvement plan is roads it's infrastructure, it's water and wastewater, right, water and wastewater in that too. And we're actually going to be doing a council item on that, if not at the next meeting, the meeting after. We are just wrapping up creating our capital improvement plan. So we will be able to show what the vision and what the plan is for that. But to go back out of the weeds a little bit on that answer, yes, we are actively planning on those improvements and what needs to be done and prioritizing how, where are our dollars going to be most effective, those sorts of things.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And more specifically, is there any plan to add city sewer services to some of the more easily reached areas? A lot of our city is really comprised of just small cul-de-sac type areas. That could be, done pretty economically as opposed to addressing a neighborhood of hundreds of homes. You
Sure.
could have 10 to 30 homes on a cul-de-sac or a small area.
I'm
How
gonna-
is that going to be addressed?
I'm going to let Michelle take that one.
So the problem is with the older homes, unfortunately, is when they were built, of course, they had their aerobic or OSSF systems installed. So for us to go put sewer in, the biggest issue is those homes would have to come on to sewer immediately. We can't wait for the system to fail, because then it's not economic for us to have done that. We're paying off money, we're paying out money to have that there, that we're not getting money back if we don't come on. A lot of people don't want to come on until their system fails. And so it's not economically advantaged for us to go out and do that until we have a lot of failures or until an entire neighborhood agrees. And that's very hard to do, to get everybody to agree.
Okay, and to ask a more specific question now, which relates to me, is that we were fortunate enough to get Trinity Drive done a few years ago.
Oh, yes, sir.
A total improvement on that. It would have made a lot more sense if they had put in city sewer before they did that road. So are we just saying we're not going to do it because probably to put in sewer service there, they'd have to come in and tear up that new road? And the same is true of Sandbassins and other roads that we have around here.
Michelle, do you want to take that one?
We looked at it at the time, we talked about it, but again, it's saying we didn't have enough people willing to come on at that point. And we'd only had a couple requests, and so it just didn't make sense for us to go ahead and make that investment at that point.
Okay, so what you're really saying is this is kind of a citizen-driven thing. And
Unfortunately,
if we wanted, for instance, our road relatively short, a couple small cul-de-sacs, we got all the citizens together there and petitioned the city for sewer service, then it would be more seriously.
it would be, we take a greater look at it. Now, I will be honest, and it also depends on how the sewer runs too, because remember, we have to get it to the plant, so we still gotta run it through other places as well, so, but yeah.
I'm no engineer, or don't know the city systems, but it would seem for those smaller areas, it would be easy to do since there's sewer services available. They may need to be upgraded. Okay. But
We'll go
on
into
the
that.
practical side, having what I just said, since we've seen major erosion and road improvements there, and we have probably a 20 to 30 years debt service on that, they're not likely to come in here our roads to put in sewer.
Probably, well, we actually on sewer, we would probably go outside the road at that point anyway. Go into the right of way stuff.
Right. Okay.
And you'll learn more about that in our Public Works University as well, but we're happy to talk to you more about that offline too.
I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up because we need to start getting set up for the council budget workshop here in a few minutes. Paul, I think you had your hand up.
I was just curious, in the same scenario, the developer submits his plan and the plan says septic, and the city say no, you're gonna go to it.
It depends, and I'm gonna, and I don't know, it depends on lot size more than anything, and it depends on which water is gonna be available. Like, if we're providing the water, or if they are providing wells, and that makes the difference, because that's state law versus us at that point, so. Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, and especially for the benefit of those who might be watching, those of you who are here, if you want to get one of my cards before you go, if you guys have follow-up questions, we're going to start. Also, thank you all for being here. It's really nice to see engaged folks taking an active role in our community. We're going to start a webpage for Muni-versity. This will be our first topic. The video from this morning and all of my slides will be posted on there. And we're also going to do, I've written down some of the questions that I've gotten and some of the information you guys have asked for, so I'm going to add some of that to what we have. If anyone wants to discuss this further or has a question, my email is rhoffman, Hoffman, @willowpark.org. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm here for you guys. I'm here to help you guys get the answers that you need about the community and to help facilitate great conversations between us and our stakeholders. So with that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all very much. In about 10 minutes, we'll start our council workshop.